Welcome to Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. I'm Kevin Parkerson.
And I'm Kevin Higgins. Together we bring you over 60 years in combined experience in global logistics.
In each episode, we'll dive into the latest industry trends, share practical tips, celebrate wins, and share stories from the logistics front lines, all while helping businesses optimize their logistics operations. Welcome to Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics, the show where we dive deep into the challenges, wins, and lessons learned from the global supply chain trenches. In this episode, we're spotlighting Ardent Global Logistics, a company born out of the supply chain chaos of 2021 with a clear mission to deliver exceptional people-first service in a space too often focused only on volume.
Joining us are Jason Cook, Managing Director and Seasoned Logistics Leader with experience from CMA CGM, Kuehne Nagel, and Maersk, and Paul Diedrich, a trade compliance veteran with leadership roles at Adient, General Motors, and Sandler and Travis. We'll talk about why Ardent was created, how they're redefining customer service in logistics, and what it means to be a client-focused, solutions-driven. Let's get into it. All right, let's bring these guys back. All right, Paul and Jason, welcome.
Hey, welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Morning, Kevins.
Yeah, I feel
Good
like
morning,
we're joined by the dynamic duo from Ardent Global Logistics, kind of like a version of Ardent's version of Jason Bourne and Paul McCartney. So solving supply chain mysteries and maybe even playing a couple of tunes. So I'll let the audience decide who's who.
Yeah, I'm stoked to see somebody from Sandler and Travis. That's a name that you don't hear often. We had Sandler and Travis, and we did some business with them back in the day at Walmart stores. So good to see that name. So good to have you guys with us this morning.
Yeah,
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So maybe let's start with just a brief introduction. Jason, I'll let you go first. Tell the audience a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Like you mentioned, I've been in the ocean freight world for basically all my career right out of college. Started out at the port of Charleston, doing a quick internship there, learning about the containers coming in and out of the port, and was ready to go work full time. And they mentioned I should probably go look at some of the ocean carriers. So I started at Maersk Line, moved up to New York City. Had only been to New York City once in my life, and really started to cut my teeth on some large importers on the East Coast, just doing some back office admin, and then progressed throughout my career. Did a brief stint at Kuehne Nagel, worked at CMA CGM for 6 years. Got the opportunity to go to Marseille, work in the headquarters, do trade management on some of the vessels coming from Southeast Asia, South China to the U.S., managing the P&L profitability, making sure the ships are full. Moved back to the U.S. and in 2020, 2021, there was this thing that happened in the world that really changed a lot. At that time, I had my first child and was really I was getting a lot of calls from customers. Hey, Jason, what do I do? I'm really struggling. It's hard to get space. It's hard to find. I haven't had a booking in 6 weeks. What do I do? And I just got the idea to maybe try to get an FMC license and see if I could help. I had no clue. I was just one person. But I knew I had the experience. I knew that I had worked in the headquarters for a little bit. I had some contacts in Asia. And, before you know it, I had resigned from CMA. Sent a few emails, did a brief stint at a technology company called Transvoyant, and then was able to book a few containers. I had one container for one customer moving in. I called 3 other customers who I knew that were going to need some help. They all said, Jason, here's everything I have. Whatever you can give me, let me know. And I came back a couple days later, said, hey, I can do 2 or 3 here, 4 or 5 there. And really, Ardent was born and we were kind of off to the races at that point. So we're focused on just going above and beyond, providing unreasonable hospitality for our customers, and now we're up to 15 people. We're a fully remote business, so we kind of have people all over the U.S. and we've been growing significantly. So we have about 150 customers today, and we really just focus on doing the things that are simple but not easy, right? So picking up the phone, getting back to customers whenever they expect you to get back to them, trying to find solutions. We were founded during COVID, so we ran to the burning building, right? And now we're experiencing kind of a new revolution of challenges with the Trump tariff world, which is one of the reasons why we brought Paul on. So Paul, you want to do maybe a quick introduction, and we're running into the burning building of Trump tariffs world as well.
Yeah.
I think this, the fact of the timing of when you started in Ardent Logistics, I think tells our listeners, a lot about you, because that is not the time for many of these businesses to start. So I think that is pretty telling. But yeah, let's hear a little bit, Paul. I think you're maybe one of the newer members of the Ardent family. Tell us a little bit about your career journey thus far.
Yeah, so I've been in trade compliance for 35 years.
Wow.
I made the mistake of answering an ad for a mailroom position at a broker. I didn't even know what it was. And yeah, so I managed to work my way up through brokerage operations, and I've spent various times in my career working either for a broker or forwarder. I've worked for some of the largest importers in the world. And then I've also run Sandler Travis Trade Advisory Services. So I'm a licensed customs broker. I'm a licensed attorney. But I think what kind of makes me unique in this space is that I have a different approach, I think, than a lot of classically educated attorneys that haven't necessarily spent time working in operations. And in that, I look at things from an operational mindset, right? And I try to come up with solutions that, adhere to the regulatory and compliance measures, but are adaptable to actual implementation into business practice, right? And so I think, especially today, that's where we're seeing this conflict between, what we're supposed to do and what the business needs and what the business is trying to do. So.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna. That's awesome. What an amazing start. It's really interesting as Higgins, as we hear, our guests come on and talk about how they got into the industry, and it's no one ever planned for it. No one, very few. I say no one. Very few actually planned for it. They have stories similar to what you're talking about, Paul. I don't know if they applied for a mailroom position, but
no,
almost.
I think that's awesome. I love two things. First, if I want to get something, I want to get something out of the way though. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yep, you're good.
All right, good. I just want to make sure that I got that clear. Yeah. But I love the, the idea of that operations background and operations understanding from a legal perspective and from a trade compliance perspective, because a lot of times you just get like the black and white, right? So here's what here's what it says, here's what the articles say, here's what the law says. But it's not real feasible operationally. So bringing that operational understanding into trade compliance and legal is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because it's one of the first questions that I ever ask people that I meet in this industry is, how did you get here?
Yeah.
Because you're right. I don't know many people that ever started out to do this. Somehow we stumble into it. And then the next thing you know, it's 10, 15 years and, you've started building a career. It's just funny. So that's usually one of my opening questions to people I'm interviewing or whatnot are, how did you manage to stumble into this?
Yeah.
So why? Exactly. Yeah. And then next is, why are you still in it? Right.
Well, I've retired and failed twice. So, I'm back, been with Ardent now for a couple of months. And, I keep kind of questioning some of my life choices these days about, what did I do for a career? And, would I have been better off as a Starbucks barista than as a trade attorney? But you never know,
Yeah. You could be a podcast host sitting across the table from Parkerson.
There you go. Boom.
Yeah, there you go.
Literally dropped the mic on that one. Hey guys, listen, I want to get to the topic of the day. I know everyone's talking about it, and typically tariffs don't scream a fun topic. But and we're going to talk a lot about Ardent Global Logistics and throughout the episode. But there are, in this episode, we're putting the real world in real world global logistics. Talking about the new shifts in trade policy playing out in containers, contracts, and cost. So if tariffs were a movie genre, comedy, horror, political thriller, how would you cast your role in this movie?
I'd like to say where we try to come in to be more of the heroes, and try to save the people from the nightmare of the tariffs today.
So I would say that we are this is an action thriller, right? And you have some bad guys, you have some good guys, and our part is we're just the guide, right? I mean, the true heroes are the customers. Every single day, they get more things thrown at them than they can even think about, and then the next morning, it's a complete pivot or another obstacle or something else that they have to do to be able to deliver their goods and their products and their services to their customers. So I think where we play in is we're the guide, right? We're the narrator. We are guiding these customers who are the true heroes to find better solutions, to find workarounds, to come up with good ideas, to consult them on figuring out really how to navigate the choppy waters, whether it's limited capacity, whether it's the tariffs that are in place now. We're just here to help.
Yeah. I love that, Jason. So is that kind of your why as a company? As an industry, we're filled with freight forwarders and brokers and 3PLs. What makes Ardent Global Logistics Ardent, and where did Ardent come from?
That's a good question. Ardent means passion, right? And everyone who joins our team has a true North Star. We are passionate about serving underserved customers. I think that there's a large part of the market that is being very well served by the companies that they work with, but then there's another large part that they just don't know what they don't know. And when we go to hire people on our team, we hire experienced logisticians, experienced professionals who worked at an Expeditors, who worked at a UPS, who worked with the ocean carrier, who has experience, and kind of everyone who joins, they noticed that sometimes the larger companies don't always focus on small to medium-sized businesses, and those small to medium-sized businesses that might be off the beaten path, that don't get too many visits, those are the ones that truly struggle when things get tough. And so our why and our North Star is, like I mentioned, to run into that burning building and to help customers who truly need help. And there are a lot of them out there that just aren't getting the service level that they deserve. They're not getting email responses timely. Sometimes truckers just don't pick up their goods, so they're paying demurrage and detention for just laziness in the industry. Like you mentioned, there are a lot of freight forwarders. There are a lot of service providers in our industry. And what that does is it kind of provides a lower bar. There's a low bar to enter, but there's a higher bar to provide the service level to hold on to the customers. So, whenever we gain accounts, we really don't lose them, right? I mean, we make sure that we get the invoicing right. We make sure that we are responding timely. We make sure that we provide that hospitality and that service level and that communication that customers just don't get anymore.
Yeah, no, that's great, Jason. I think you kind of answered my next question, but you mentioned it earlier. And trust me, Paul, we're going to get to tariffs and everything
Don't
in
worry.
just a little bit with you. But and this is part of part of this question. But every logistics company says they offer great service. But the current environment, tariffs and trade complexity, have really separated the talkers from the doers. So how has Ardent proven its value to clients in this in this type of landscape?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love the first intro meeting. We have great service and great rates, right? Like just trust us.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But when we bring people on, we look for people who are humble, who are willing to do the work, to roll their sleeves up and to dig the ditch. And when we talk to customers, we never say we have great service and great rates. We say, give us the opportunity to prove ourselves that we can be a trustworthy provider. And it's really that trust that makes the difference. If someone is just looking for the best rate, service failures are going to happen all the time. But if they're looking to build a trusted relationship with their service providers, I would say that we're definitely the right fit. Communication works two ways. We always try to communicate to our customers. We expect communication from our customers as well, and we appreciate our customers. We try to make the intentional effort to make sure our customers feel appreciated, and then we love to be appreciated by our customers as well. And I think that just kind of creates a mutual partnership that is built around trust.
I love that trust is the first thing you talked about, and not great rates and all of that, but building that trust and getting the customer to trust you first, because you just don't hear. You get some lip service sometimes, but you just don't hear that as like the opening statement with the customer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And we never say we never ask our customers just to trust us. We ask them to give us the opportunity to prove ourselves.
Yes.
We're out there. We're playing the same game. We're on the field playing the same exact game with the same exact rules. And there's bigger ones, there's smaller ones, but we know that if we do the basic blocking and tackling, we show up every single day. We try to get 1% better. That we can be on that same field and compete with anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So real quickly, KP, I don't want to diverge too much, but Jason, so what services do you guys provide? I'm assuming that you're also a licensed custom broker. You said you got your FMC license, so gone through all of that. So what all services do you guys provide to your customers?
Great question, Kevin. I mean, I think really our aim is to service the end-to-end journey from door to door. That's ocean import, that's ocean export, that's air freight, import, export, and then doing all of the paperwork on the front end, doing the customs and the trade work on the back end, and then providing innovative solutions around tariff strategies or setting up bonded facilities. That's a huge topic these days. Setting up foreign trade zones.
Yep.
If I had, we've been contacted more times in the past 10 days than I've had discussions in the past 5.5 years. So
I want to peel that back in a little bit. So we'll come back to that for sure.
Okay.
But maybe from that, maybe from a 30,000 foot view, how would you describe the current mood amongst, your clients, importers, exporters? Are you seeing panic? Are you seeing paralysis, or more of a strategic pivot?
I think that's a good question. I would say we're seeing all of the above, right? I've had I've had more calls with customers in the past 2.5 weeks than I think I've ever had. Everyone is either in a state of panic or they're in a total state of paralysis. Their hands are cuffed. They don't know what else to do. They don't know how to they don't know how to pivot. But then there's a lot of professional companies who have expected this for 5-6 years. They've started to pivot. They've created backup plans. They've generated Southeast Asia production facilities. One customer in particular that comes to mind, they did 80% of their volume last year completely out of China. And right whenever the tariffs went in place, they went into overdrive, started having strategic meetings. They had production facilities in Malaysia, in Vietnam, and they're going to completely shift over 80 to 85% of their volume just on the dime for this year. This is a Christmas importer as well, so they're under the gun right now. And if they had a level of paralysis for the next 2 months, they'd probably be completely underwater for the whole entire season if they had no options to do.
Yeah.
And then, there's other customers that maybe heard the signals and probably are kicking themselves now. And they don't have too many other options. And yes, they're scrambling now to find production facilities in other countries, but they're probably just a little bit worried that it might be too little too late. So it's a wide array. I think there's a lot of small to medium sized businesses that if nothing changes in the next 2 to 3 weeks per se, they might close up, right? They might just say,
That is a
okay,
very real,
this was a good run. Some of the e-commerce businesses that just did a one China import policy, they might wave the white flag and just say, okay, maybe it's not worth it anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Jason, you are spot on with the small and medium sized clients that I have. That is a very real world scenario that may play out if there's not some significant changes in the coming weeks. But also you're kind of getting to some of the some of my future questions, which I love. But you both work closely with clients facing kind of different challenges. Jason, yours may be more from a strategy lens, and Paul perhaps maybe a little bit more operationally. Jason, you kind of already done this, but maybe Paul, let's hear. Can you share a recent example where Ardent helped a client mitigate maybe the tariff impact in a creative or efficient way? Or what are you hearing? How are you helping these clients?
Well, I think it's a number of different things. So, certainly there's a lot of confusion in our industry just about how to correctly file an entry. And frankly, as an industry, we're not getting a lot of the typical concrete guidance that we would get, and the policy is instead coming out in vague terms, with wording that can be construed in many different ways. So we recently just helped a client recover $40,000 in duty because a broker missed an exemption. And, and it's hard because as a broker myself, I can't fault them in this environment, right? We're all doing the best we can, but mistakes happen, and especially in times like this. And so, just even being a second set of eyes for our customers, and offering to review, their transactions to see if there's any way we can help has been one of the things that we've been doing, and that one, clearly I wasn't clearing it for them, or Ardent wasn't clearing it for them. But, as a customer, that $40,000 in duty is staying alive or not staying alive.
Yeah.
Right.
Geez.
And so
Yeah.
it's a big deal. And I think that's the hardest part for me, frankly, is on some of these calls is I feel sadness. And it's sadness because I can't necessarily help. And my hands are often now tied, and that's a very uncomfortable position for me to be in. Right? I like being the person that can find the solutions.
Yeah.
I pride myself on being that person. And in today's environment, they just haven't left us with a lot of options.
Right.
So.
Well, Jason, you mentioned this a little bit more earlier, so we'll definitely come back to it. But are you starting to see a rise, and maybe Paul, you can speak to this as well, obviously. You're seeing a rise in demand for what I'll call tariff engineering or re-engineering. Jason, you mentioned FTZ utilization. You mentioned earlier alternative country sourcing. Some clients who are really ahead of the game a little bit more are just dusting off their playbook that they've had and created since 2020 and executing that. And I think that really what separates some who are handling this a little bit better. But how is Ardent guiding clients through those type decisions?
We're doing a lot of analysis for clients, helping them formulate business decisions, business cases, looking at sourcing options, trying to analyze the duty impact if they do modify sourcing. As far as tariff engineering, that's certainly something that customers are questioning now, right? People are suddenly becoming classification professionals or experts, some rightly, some wrongly.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably where we all need to start, right? And where importers need to start. A lot of US importers tend to rely on suppliers for classification, and they just use whatever the supplier says, right? And they're not trained to do classification. And so because these tariffs and the exemptions are often at a 6 or 8 digit HTS level, right? Classification and accurate classification is the most important thing you can do right now. And so, going through, we are doing classification review projects on behalf of clients and, just trying to see, is it classified correctly? Does it properly fit in an exemption? What can we do, if anything? So it's been basically stripping everything back in some cases and just having conversations from the very beginning. Like, what are we producing and where are we producing it? And what are our options? And let's just put it all on the table. Right. And let's just start analyzing and figure out what we're going to do.
Yeah. So do you think these tariff dynamics are accelerating any of those long-term shifts? You mentioned, Jason, earlier, more of like the nearshoring, maybe alternate port routings, maybe even changes of what resilience means in supply chain planning?
I mean, I think they have to, right? So I've been really impressed by some of these customers that I've spoken to recently and the foresight that they have in terms of having a level of prediction of what the future might hold. Obviously, focusing on sourcing from other countries is a must, right? We're doing the same, right? Like we're sourcing customers who are now focusing on other trade lanes as well, because we have a China problem just like a lot of these importers. So as a company, we've had to pivot and say, hey, customers are going to have to start sourcing from India. They're going to have to start sourcing from Southeast Asia. They're going to look to Turkey, Brazil, some other countries that they could have a viable supplier for the interim until maybe they do find a solution to manufacture things inside the U.S. So personally, we've done a little bit of shifting in our strategy as well, and I 100% have heard and expect customers to do the same. I think the other option, or the other idea that customers are having, is to park cargo in some sort of bonded facility where they don't have to pay the duties right up front. Just yesterday, a customer's like, okay, well, fine, if I have to pay the 145%, I can do it, but I can't take the cash flow hit up front. That 145% cash flow hit right when it enters the United States, before I sell the product to my end customer, before I have 90 days of getting the cash back, is like that's part of the engineering that might not work for a lot of these customers, that we can help to either set up their own, if they have their own facility set up as a bonded or a foreign trade zone where it makes sense. Or, I've been kind of playing matchmaker for the past week and a half of like, okay, we have warehouse partners. There's bonded facility right here, right next to your distribution center. You can park it here. And it's been impressive to hear some of these customers think out loud. He's like, okay, well, I want to get these goods on the water in here, because I know that if the tariff is reduced, there's going to be a flood. There's going to be a flood of orders, a flood of cargo. He's like, I'd rather get it in, pay a little bit more on the bonded side, maybe take advantage of a lower ocean freight rate, because once that demand pops, the ocean freight rates are also going to go a little bit crazy. And it's been really impressive to hear some of these customers have a proactive way of thinking to protect their business, to protect their cash flow, and take action whenever things get tough, instead of take the punches on the chin without really fighting.
Yeah. Well, I think if you can find a bonded warehouse, I know that's one of the big things now. But I have two questions. So part of the administration's review of duty rates and new tariffs implemented on China and other countries is trade imbalance. So if we see a shift, let's say we start seeing shift of production to Turkey, shift of production to India, other places like that, which we will. At what point does that come back into play? The trade imbalance grows now with another country, and then we see, additional duties that are implemented because there's a larger trade imbalance now on a different country. So now we're out of whack with India. So go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, I mean, if you look at the reciprocal tariff announcement, right, you could see the percentages as they were applied to India, Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia. I mean, that was a reaction to the transfer of the manufacturing from China to those Southeast Asian countries after the first round of tariffs, right? Exactly. And so, I think that's why you're seeing 46%, 36%. And so I think that's part of the miscalculation to this aspect of nearshoring all this manufacturing is that, there's still a cost prohibitive side of manufacturing in the US, right? And there's just some things that will never be economical to manufacture in the US. And so I do worry about people that are putting factories or sourcing to Southeast Asia because I'm not sure what the administration is going to do long term. And I do fear that there will be some increase in those reciprocal tariff rates for those other countries as time goes on, and they realize that that's where the manufacturing has shifted and not necessarily back to the U.S. where they intended.
100%. We saw that in 2018 with the steel imports, right? So the 25%
Exactly.
duty on the steel and moving a lot of manufacturing to Vietnam, and then that threw that out of whack, and that's why the tariffs on Vietnam are now higher than they were, because we saw a big push, and it's just one of those things that's going to happen. The second question that I had goes to Paul, and maybe it's a little different now with the way that these reciprocal tariffs are structured, but how are we going to see an increase in misclassifications because of these things?
Misclassifications?
Well, intentional.
I don't know that I would use that term.
Intentional classifications of something else, I guess I should say. So I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but we've seen, using a different classification than your product has been in the industry for forever. It happens. But are we going to see an increase in reviews on those things?
I think so. And I think, importers need to be very careful. I think, if you've got an import history that shows you import, a widget under a certain classification, and that's your import history for 2 years, and then suddenly your import history changes, right? And now your classification changes, and maybe your origin changes, right? And the origin might be easier to explain. But even that, transshipment, right? Beyond classification, transshipment is a huge issue and concern for the administration. So I do think people are trying to be creative in their classifications, and classification is subjective. There's always, subjective opinions about classification. And, if you can adequately support it and you can defend it and you can avoid any sort of claim of negligence, then, let's look at it. Sure. But, I've also seen the people that are just blatantly, we're going to take it from here and we're going to put it over here. And it doesn't make any sense, from a classification process perspective or rules. But, I do worry about that. And I think the aggressive nature of the administration, people need to be very careful. I think it was just yesterday, there was a notice or an article that came out about collection of duties, associated to transshipment. So it's not like they're not going to target you. And so that's kind of my advice to clients today is, consider what the history is. They know as much about what you've imported as you do. And if you suddenly make a lot of changes, you're going to draw attention.
Yeah. And I think that's
great advice.
The reason I ask those questions, because it's very important for people to partner with people like you that understand this and are going to be a trusted advisor in these situations. So it's very easy.
Right.
I could look through the HTS and I could, this is what it should be, right? But I'm not that guy. So I think it's very important for people to understand you've got to be very careful and you have to have a trusted partner in this process.
100%. 100%. Yep. So, guys, we often say global trade is kind of like a living organism. It adapts and reacts. What do you think this current round of tariff pressure is teaching us as an industry, and how, more importantly, is Ardent using this to prepare clients for whatever might be next? There's the crystal ball question.
The crystal ball piece has been the most difficult. For me as a professional, especially in compliance, right? We're the rules guys. We like rules. We know how to follow rules, and we're good at it, right? And we're good at getting other people to follow rules. This is craziness, because the rules just don't exist, and we're really playing. And I can't even say that we're playing, Federal Register notice to Federal Register notice. We're playing true social post to true social post.
Yeah.
And when you're seeing trade and tariff policy being announced, through a true social post, and then we as an industry expert, right, are expected to be able to translate that and, relay that information to our clients, it makes me very uncomfortable, right, as a professional when I'm not certain that I know the answer correctly, right? I can read it and I can give you my opinion based on 35 years of experience, but I'll tell you what I'm seeing now isn't supported by 35 years of experience, right?
Yeah.
What I'm seeing now is not anything that I've ever seen before. And so it is very difficult for me to try to give people opinions that I know they're going to make a business decision on, when I can't tell them that tomorrow what I told you today is still going to be valid. And so there's almost like that apprehension about giving advice these days, because you don't want to be wrong and you don't want to come across like you're not knowledgeable. But the reality is you give them an opinion based on the facts in the morning, and there's an executive order in the afternoon that completely upends everything that you just said.
Yeah,
that's right.
So it's so hard to keep up and keep everybody informed, and you don't want to be the fault of anybody, making a bad business decision based off your advice.
More so on the ocean freight piece and the global trade piece. You're right, Kevin. It is a living organism, and living organisms sometimes can expand and sometimes they can contract. And I think that the ocean freight industry has been one of the most interesting stories over the past 30 years. To come into a market that grows 5, 10, 15% like clockwork, year after year after year after year. I mean, the market grows, right? There has never been a prolonged period of contraction in the ocean freight global shipping market, and we all know that kind of the scales are going to tip at some point, and maybe this is the catalyst. And the question is, how do carriers operate in an environment whenever you're not seeing that same steady growth? You can't plan for, okay, well, it's going to be growth of 3 to 9% this year. I don't know where it's going to land, but we're going to grow. So let's just go ahead and plug some more ships. Let's build some more ships. Let's, create some more partnerships. Maybe we're going to enter some sort of global trade contractionary environment. And then how does competition, ocean carrier competition, react to entering a market that has always operated on growth, and now coming to a situation where maybe the next 5, 10 years, it's not the same?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's that is very interesting to start thinking about that.
There's layers in that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well, listen, I just recently read, Eric Johnson over at the JOC recently said something that really hit home for me, and for all of us in the logistics space. Most shippers' international logistics teams are small. They're stretched thin even in the best of times.
Yep.
Now with the tariffs shifting, I'll go down the list: USTR, shipping fees looming, some things going on with the FMC poking around, et cetera. All the pressures are real. And Eric went on to say, not every 3PL is built to be a true consultative type partner 24/7. But I think that's exactly the kind of moment where companies like Ardent Logistics really can kind of stand out. So what's Ardent doing to fill that gap as a real partner and not just a freight, broker? And I think you've talked a lot about this, but I'm trying to, sum it up.
So I think that we're at an extreme advantage at current in a market like this. One, we're nimble. We can pivot on a dime. Two, our team is very strong. We have a really strong culture. We row the boat in the same direction. And so when there are pivots, the whole team's with us, and we're all rowing the boat to accomplish that goal for that customer, or to just achieve internally some efficiencies. If you look at these larger companies, and you can kind of pick it apart if you look into their quarterly or annual reports, they all have different strategies, like you mentioned. I mean, if you take a DSV versus a Kuehne Nagel versus an Expeditors, you've got one strong on culture, you've got one that maybe isn't growing on the ocean side, and then the other one is just a complete integrator of gobbling up a lot of smaller or now like size companies. Headcount's going to be super critical for them to weather storms in the future. And so for us, we come from a lean position. We have stayed lean. I think we will always be lean as a company to try to do more with less, without sacrificing a service level. So I think being agile and being nimble as a company is going to be a true advantage in a market like this.
You mentioned companies having small compliance and logistics teams, and for our client base, that's especially true, right? Our client base is very similarly structured to us, right? A small,
probably a team of
company,
one, right? Maybe.
right? Yeah. Exactly. And so where I see Ardent being different is that I'm talking to our clients, some of them every day, trying to help them navigate, and these are people that are having to report internally to executives or company leadership on tariffs and logistics, and they're just trying to do their job, right? And so I really feel like one of the reasons I joined Ardent was this idea of hand white glove support for clients that need it like this, right? Who weren't going to get the attention. I mean, I came from Stanley and Travis. We had 300 plus clients, and some of them were huge, and they got the most attention. To be honest, it was customers like ours, who frankly needed the most help when it came to things like this, that didn't have the internal teams to be able to support themselves. And I really feel like we can be that value add, right? We can be that support for the clients when they need it most.
Well, as we wrap up, I want to give one last. If a shipper is listening today and feels overwhelmed by all of this, all the tariff chatter, and short on the support, what's one, maybe not one word, but real briefly, what's your advice on how they start to turn some of this stress into a little bit more of a strategy?
I think they have to be adaptive, right? You have to be ready to change at any hour in this environment, because it, like Paul mentioned, it could be one Truth Social tweet that the floodgates are open, or maybe Vietnam is closed again, or maybe he had a bad conversation with someone in Europe, and now there's a lot of changes going on there. So you have to be nimble. You have to be creative to find ways to add resilience to your entire supply chain. And what we do is simple, right? I mean, we're consulting with clients, we're moving their cargo from point A to point B. I mean, in general terms, it is simple, but it's not easy, right? You go to the gym to get really fit and ripped. Like, it's simple, right? You just show up every day, you eat really well, and voila, like that's all it takes. It's simple, but it's not easy. There's not very many people that are able practice that discipline. So for companies to be lean and be disciplined and be nimble, I think is really what they're going to have in this day and age.
Yeah. I think the first thing I would tell people is take a breath, right? We just need to take a breath, and then, let's sit down and talk about it, right? But that panic, which, I completely understand, we just have to kind of calm ourselves and think rationally and logically and try to come up with the best solution. But the panic and just the sheer concern that I see today is just, it's incredible.
Great advice.
Listen, Jason, one of the hot topics right now, I'd love to get your take on USTR.
Thanks, Kevin. So I have, there seemed to be a lot of excitement around USTR, and depending the way the policy was rolled out, it definitely had some impact on the smaller ports. But really what was announced on the 17th, I think it's a total nothing burger. One reason, you look at the capacity of ships that are Chinese made. Most of the ocean carriers, it's 20% or less. This could be totally detrimental to Costco. Definitely, there's a little bit of concern there, but otherwise, they've given these companies 180 days to rework their network to eliminate the impact of having these Chinese vessels call these American ports. Mm-hmm. It really, I think it's going to be a total non-event for the customers. It's definitely going to be added work for the ocean lines. But really, I don't see it being super impactful to the end customer. There might be a small surcharge. It definitely adds a little bit of cost to the ocean carriers. But some of the numbers that they were throwing around a couple of months ago, $800 a container, all of these different things. They're going to be able to rework their network, and maybe one port call every couple of weeks will get this tax, but otherwise doesn't seem like it's going to be super impactful.
Yeah. So Jason, basically with what we know today, late April, of all the things that an importer and exporter needs to be thinking about, this and the small teams that they have and the workload that they have, this is probably lower on the priority list, would you say?
I would say absolutely. It adds a little bit of cost to the ocean carriers, but it's going to be a smaller line item than what it could have been. If they rolled it out differently.
Yeah. So be aware of it. Have it on the list. But you got plenty of other things, tariffs in particular with Paul, right? So work on those. Partner with Ardent Global Logistics for that. Well, listen, guys, I know these are trying times, and it's so refreshing to hear, the philosophy and the approach that Ardent Global Logistics has with your clients and the industry as a whole. That's definitely what is needed in times like this. So, that's a wrap on this episode of Kev Talks Real World Global Logistics. A big thank you to Jason and to Paul for sharing the story behind Ardent Global Logistics, for reminding us all what it means to be truly client-focused and solution-driven. From navigating trade policy shifts to building resilient supply chains with the help of smart tech, Jason and Paul offered invaluable insights that reflect Ardent's mission to serve the often overlooked businesses in our industry. To learn more about Ardent or to connect with the team, check out ardentgloballogistics.com. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep pushing global logistics forward, one solution at a time. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. If today's discussion inspired you, don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast.
Remember, every great journey in logistics starts with a single step forward. Let's continue working together to transform the industry.